Tropical Weather News Bulletin. The Atlantic enters a more active phase. Good evening, and welcome to our weather news forecast. It's a pleasure to be with you again in this familiar time slot. Tonight's bulletin focuses on the key signals indicating that tropical cyclone activity across the Atlantic is increasing as we head into the second half of September, traditionally regarded as the peak of the hurricane season. The U.S. National Hurricane Center, NHC, has now officially marked an area of interest off the coast of Africa, where a new tropical wave is preparing to move offshore. Notably, the probability of tropical cyclone formation with this system has been raised compared to yesterday, reflecting a more favorable atmospheric environment. Ladies and gentlemen, if last week the weather map across the entire basin still looked relatively quiet, from today onward, new signals have begun to emerge. Satellite imagery along the West African coast shows a dense cluster of thunderstorms, the birthplace of the system forecast to move into the Atlantic in the coming days. At the moment, the Gulf of Mexico, the Caribbean Sea, and the Western Atlantic remain calm, with no organized low-pressure centers strong enough to be named. But the arrival of this new candidate off Africa is a clear indication that the 2025 hurricane season may be entering a more active phase. According to the latest NHC update, the yellow shaded zone on their monitoring map marks the area to watch. The chance of development into a tropical depression within the next 7 days is now 30%, up from 20% yesterday. While this is not a high number, it demonstrates a gradual shift toward more favorable conditions. NHC also notes that in the coming days, this tropical wave will detach from the West African coast and travel westward through the main development region, MDR, the incubator for most major Atlantic hurricanes. One key point: although no storm is currently active, this year's hurricane name list is still long. The next name will be Gabrielle, the tropical wave monitored last week, despite persisting for nearly a week, ultimately failed to develop due to dry air and strong wind shear. Thus, Gabrielle is still waiting to be assigned to the first qualifying system in this new sequence of waves. Let's turn to the numerical weather models. The European ECMWF model suggests that within the next 48 to 72 hours, the disturbance off West Africa will move offshore with a weak spin. By Sunday, the system becomes a more defined tropical wave with expanding convection. However, in the 5 to 7 days that follow, ECMWF indicates it will weaken as it encounters remnants of Saharan dust and lingering upper-level wind shear. Interestingly, ECMWF emphasizes a second wave, expected later in September with a more favorable environment for hurricane development. By contrast, the American GFS model presents a different picture. According to GFS, once offshore, the first wave could organize quickly, possibly reaching storm strength while still far out at sea. This scenario would create a system that curves north and northeast, remaining mostly over water with limited land impact. GFS also sketches another noteworthy scenario: in 7 to 10 days, a large-scale Central American gyre, CAG, may develop over Central America, potentially spawning a low-pressure area in the Western Caribbean or Gulf of Mexico. Should that occur, the risk would be greater, given its proximity to land. Meanwhile, the German ICON model, usually more conservative, agrees on the existence of the first tropical wave after it leaves Africa, but expects slow development with limited intensity at first. The fact that ECMWF, GFS, and ICON all acknowledge this first wave reinforces the likelihood of a tropical depression forming next week. Looking deeper into ensemble forecasts gives us a clearer sense of the uncertainty. The ECMWF ensemble of 51 members shows about half maintaining the low-level center of the first wave, while the rest see it dissipating in the MDR. In contrast, signals for the second wave are stronger, with many members forecasting cyclonic development. The GFS ensemble highlights two clusters, one showing storm formation in the Atlantic, the other, weaker, suggesting possible development tied to the CAG scenario in the Western Caribbean and Gulf. This implies not just one, but potentially a series of tropical waves taking shape in the weeks ahead. Large-scale climate factors must also be considered. In September, mid-level humidity, wind shear strength, and the retreat of Saharan dust all play decisive roles. According to the Climate Prediction Center, CPC, the MDR is gradually becoming less suppressed, with moisture increasing and upper-level winds stabilizing. CPC has highlighted a red zone on its global hazard map, showing a 40% chance of tropical cyclone development in the Atlantic during September 17 to 23. This aligns with forecasts that the second wave may have higher potential. It's important to stress, no storm today does not mean no storm next week. History shows that in peak season, a tropical wave can evolve into a strong hurricane in just a few days. Early monitoring and frequent updates are crucial for safety. Another detail, because last week's wave never reached tropical depression status. The name, Gabrielle, still remains unused. Sometimes this makes a season feel slow, but in reality, conditions can shift suddenly into a burst of activity. The lesson: convective clouds and rain bands alone are not enough to assign a name. We need a well-defined circulation, a closed low-level center, and sustained organization. Beyond the Atlantic, let's briefly touch on the U.S. forecast. Across the central and northern plains tonight, strong thunderstorms with gusty winds and hail are possible, especially in North Dakota and Minnesota. Meanwhile, the Northeast and much of the East Coast continue to enjoy pleasant early autumn weather, mild and mostly dry. In the Rockies and Intermountain West, topographic convection brings scattered thunderstorms with localized flash flood risk. In South Florida, persistent moisture-driven storms could trigger short-term urban flooding. To wrap up this first half of our bulletin, here are 5 key points for coastal communities. The current quiet phase is only temporary. The first tropical wave may open the door, but the second wave could be more powerful. An initial offshore track does not guarantee safety, as the subtropical ridge could alter the course. The Western Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico require close monitoring due to the CAG scenario. The name Gabrielle is still waiting, ready to mark the first qualifying system of this stage of the season. Moving forward, we'll dive into more detailed scenarios and the preparedness steps coastal residents should consider as tropical signals increase through the second half of September.